Welcome back to my talk on the Frozen moment in Italian opera finales. So, we're at this period of transition in the 1820s where comic opera is dying out, and audiences are really receptive, newly receptive to operas with tragic endings. We've already seen Rossini really didn't have a taste for writing tragic operas. He tried a little bit. He did two versions of Shakespeare's Othello. One with a happy ending, and then he rewrote it with an ending closer to Shakespeare's tragedy. But Rossini didn't have his heart in tragedy, and the public taste by the time he retired in 1829 had entirely shifted. Audiences wanted sad endings. So he stopped writing opera, and he never came back. He died in 1868, so he lived almost 40 more years, having retired as the most successful opera composer in Europe, and never turned back. Composers like Donizeeti, Bellini, and of course later Verdi took up the mantle, though, and really embraced this new romantic taste for tragedy. I can't exactly explain why, but in such a short period of time, you go from writing operas, audiences demanding happy endings in all their serious operas, at least in Italy, to demanding sad endings, such that all serious operas after that have an obligatory tragedy. It's quite remarkable. So one of the first really great popular an opera that achieved worldwide popularity was Donizetti's Lucia di Lammermoor of 1835. Now, Donizetti was also a very successful composer of opera buffa, and in fact his last opera buffa was in 1843, Don Pasquale. But by that point, audiences taste were much more for the serious tragedies. But the Donizetti's dramaturgy is still rooted in the comic opera traditions. So he still is writing finales and building on the fluid and accelerating pace of drama that is associated with those opera buffa finales, and likewise the Frozen moment. The finale, the Act 2 finale to Lucia, is a perfect example. Events come to a head and to a perfect moment of tension. Lucia has essentially been tricked into marrying Arthur Bucklaw. She's been tricked by her brother, who hates her lover Edgar Ravenscroft. Their families hate each other. This is essentially a variant of the Romeo and Juliet story, where the families are mortal enemies. He tricks her into thinking that Edgardo has left her. Well, the very evening that she signs the wedding contract and is to get married, Edgardo, of course, appears at that very moment, just after she signed the contract. So you have this incredible moment, and everyone freezes in place. So and there's the wonderful sextet, Chi mi frena, in tal momento, also known as the famous sextet from Lucia. And after, again, just as in the Rossini Frozen moment, the pace quickens afterwards, and action accelerates after this sextet. But the sextet is entirely frozen in time. Also note the same musical technique Donizetti uses as Rossini, that is, imitative counterpoint. Each character comes in, enters, singing the same music as the previous character did. Now, in the Rossini, the characters entered one at a time. In the Donizetti, they enter two at a time. Ironically, the first two characters that sing are the two biggest enemies, Edgardo and Enrico. But they restrain themselves for that moment. Afterwards, by the way, this is a quite interesting production that I've included the video of from it's the current Metropolitan Opera production. They set the opera much farther into the into the future from when it was originally written. The story is set, I think, in 17th century Scotland. They reset it in late 19th century. And so they're having a wedding party, and of course, as they do in modern wedding parties, they have their picture taken, and the stage director stages the frozen moment as everyone posing for a picture. Very interesting and clever way of staging the frozen moment. After that, the action accelerates very much like in comic operas, but of course this action is not funny at all. Edgardo, in public, confronts Lucia for what she's done. Of course, she's entirely innocent. No, he doesn't know that, though, and he takes his ring off and throws it at her, and publicly humiliates her. This, for better or worse, is going to be the first of several instances we'll see in opera in the 19th century where women are publicly humiliated in these complex ensembles. It makes for a heart-rending moment. Now, I call attention to this, emphasize it, because that very scene and the opera Lucia is very influential to Verdi as he comes along. Verdi's just the next half generation, and he stages a similar type of finale in the Act 3 of La Traviata. Once again, a woman Violetta is tricked or pressured to leave the person that she loves, not meaning to betray him on her own. Alfredo's father implies that his family is ruined if Alfredo continues to live with her, so she selflessly leaves him. Now, she won't tell him that, and so he, as Edgardo had been in Lucia di Lammermoor, comes back thinking that he's been betrayed. He thinks she's left him for another man, and she won't relent and tell him the truth. So we have this incredibly dramatic scene from Franco Zeffirelli's film adaptation from 1983, one of probably the finest film adaptation of an opera. Alfredo drags her to public and ceremoniously pays her for her services as his mistress. Now, the frozen moment, Verdi does not freeze moments quite, certainly not like Rossini, nor quite like Donizeeti. The action never absolutely stops. It just slows down quite a bit. So, at Verdi, you really do have an ebb and flow of time, accelerating and slowing down. But the frozen moment really comes at the very end, where the chorus and all the principals repeat and reflect. That moment is truly static, but it comes at the very end. So the frozen moment here functions more as a denouement rather than an eye in the middle of the storm. The storm here has passed, and everyone is sort of recovering or dealing with the fallout at this moment. But you will recognize the debt that Verdi owes to Donizeeti when you see this scene. Okay, enjoy those.